So please join me in Gassho with palms together and heads bowed as I read verse 116 from the Shouzo Matsu Wasan. I am such that I do not know right and wrong, and cannot distinguish false and true. I lack even small love and small compassion, and yet, for fame and profit, enjoy teaching others. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. So good morning, everybody. It's really nice to be here. This is my first time, and I'm going to take a little bit of time to adjust the microphone and be able to read my notes. Before I start my Dharma message, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Reverend John Turner and Reverend Mutsumi Wondra for inviting Noriko Sensei and myself to speak at this very special Ho'onko service. And I would like to thank all of you. Wow, there's a lot of you here today, and I even actually recognize some faces from Seattle. But this is my fourth MA assignment, and it's totally voluntary, and I consider myself to be the itinerant minister's assistant, if you will. I just also note, Ellen Sensei and I did Tokudo, and I was really supported by her, 11 years ago now. So let me start here. Today, I've named my talk, A Life of Self-Reflection and Humility. And the passage that I read is from one of Shinran Shonin's wasans. It's the Shouzo Matsu wasan, and it's verse 116. And when we read this or listen to it, we don't always absorb the message. So I just want to take a little time and just read it again to you. I am such that I do not know right and wrong, and cannot distinguish false and true. I lack even small love and small compassion, and yet, for fame and profit, enjoy teaching others. These are the words of Shinran Shonin. And Ho'onko, and many of you have attended this temple for many, many years, and you probably know the meaning or the definition of Ho'onko, but I want to go ahead and go over that again just to review it. Ho'onko, Ho'ong, is translated as return of gratitude. Ko is clarify the meaning of. And so when you put Ho'onko together, it is translated as repaying our debt of gratitude. And so today, we honor the memory. It's January 16th is when the physical presence of Shinran Shonin was lost to us. He was born in 1173 and died at the age of 89 in 1263. And this is one of the many depictions that we have of him. So we consider this as Shin Buddhists to be probably the most important memorial, right, of the year. Because in our Jodo Shinshu tradition, it's when we honor Shinran Shonin's life. And we consider him to be the founder. And I say we consider him to be the founder of our Jodo Shinshu tradition. And I say we consider because I think he didn't do it on his own, right? He did it also with the help of his daughter and his sons and grandsons. And on the anniversary of the death of his physical presence, January 16th, we get together to recognize him and express our gratitude for all the work that he did and for all the teachings that he has passed down to us today. So, like I said, the title of my talk, let's see, I'll go back to it. So when Wondra Sensei and John Turner Sensei invited us, they asked us to please give them sort of a title, a sense of what we were going to talk about. And so I thought, okay, well, it's Ho'onko, right? So I'm going to talk about Shinran Shonin. And I'm going to title my talk, A Life of Self-Reflection and Humility. Well, I'm just going to take a moment to just digress a little bit. And since I've been at San Diego, I was there about 8 years on the MA staff. After Kenji Sensei retired, those of us that were MAs and supported San Diego, we found ourselves doing a lot of funerals and a lot of memorial services, especially because it was right after COVID, right? And so during COVID, we couldn't hold memorial services or funerals in person. And so we found ourselves starting in 2021, probably the end of it, and 2022, doing a lot of catch-up work, if you will. And for me, it was a real privilege to conduct those services. But prior to my officiating funerals and memorial services, I would attend it as family or friend of the deceased. And there were occasions, actually many occasions, when the officiant would speak of the deceased, but they really wouldn't know them. They wouldn't speak about who this person was. And that kind of bothered me. And so when I had the opportunity to start officiating, I really wanted to get to know this person. I wanted to know the life of this person. And so I would have extensive conversations with family members and with friends so that I could honor that unique life that was lost. So getting back now to Ho'onko and Shinran Shonin. So as I was gathering my information about Shinran Shonin, I thought, wait a minute, it's really rather presumptuous of me. It's rather pretentious of me to even think about this title. It's like, it kind of sounds like maybe I might have known somehow Shinran Shonin, and I might have known that Shinran Shonin was a very introspective, self-reflective person and a humble person. But Shinran Shonin, right, he lived over 800 years ago. And so how presumptuous of me to even think that I might know this very, very important person in my life and in all of your lives. And in fact, there's really, oops, look, smiley faces. Okay, let me start over here. I usually use a mouse, and so using this touchpad, is a challenge for me. Okay, that wasn't too bad. So in fact, there's really not a whole lot of verifiable facts about Shinran Shonin, right? We do know that he was born in 1173 and he died in 1263. I think those are recorded. And this year would have been his 853rd birthday, right? So I really couldn't find anybody that might have known him personally. I had to go to some of those facts so that I could dig up. And so here are what I consider to be the facts that can, in fact, maybe be verified. So again, like I said, it's a largely accepted fact that Shinran was born in 1173 and that he died in 1263 at the age of 89. And we know that he was a devout Buddhist scholar and practitioner. And we know that through his writings because he was quite prolific, right? And he left a lot of writings behind. We also know, because this is recorded, that Shinran Shonin had a lot of different names. He was born Matsuwaka Maro, and that was from a noble family. He was given the name Hannen when he became ordained at the age of 9. Shaku. Shaku was the first name given to him by Honen. And then Zenshin, which means pure mind or true mind, was another name that was given to Shinran Shonin by Honen, his teacher. Shinran, and this is the name that we know him by, right? Shinran was a name that he adopted later in life, and I didn't know this until I researched this, but it comes from two of his teachers, Vasubandhu and Danluan. Vasubandhu's Japanese name is Seshin, Seshin, and Danluan is Donran. So Shin from Seshin and Ran from Donran make up the name Shinran. So I thought that was a very interesting fact. Gutoku Shinran, many of you have heard Gutoku, right? Gutoku means stubble-headed, not rubble-headed, stubble-headed, foolish one. And this was a very famous, humble, self-given name. And it is indicative of his humility. And this is a name that he adopted again later in life. And finally, his posthumous name that was bestowed on him by imperial decree was Kenshin Daishi. Oops. So another fact, we knew that he studied the sutras of sutra teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, and he was quite familiar with the teachings of the teachers in his lineage, right? Starting with the teachers from India, Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu, the three teachers from China, Danluan, Daocho, Shandao, and then the two teachers from Japan, Genshin and Honen. And Honen is really the only teacher that he actually physically met. And then we also know that he was married. He was married to a woman by the name of Ishini. I think I have a picture of her. Here she is. This is a picture you probably have seen of her. In fact, at the Buddhist Temple of San Diego, there's a portrait of her that is in the Onaijin, right on the side of the picture of Shinran Shonin. And we also know that Shinran Shonin and Ishini probably had 6 children, and most notably Zenran, his oldest son, and Kakushini, their youngest daughter. And we know a few things about Shinran through the letters between Ishini, his wife, and Kakushini, his daughter. And it was really an interesting fact was that although those letters, right, were written like over 800 years ago, 700 years ago, they were only discovered about 100 years ago in some archives at Nishihonganji. And so these were actually just recently, well, within the last 100 years, discovered. And through these letters, we learned a little bit about the life in medieval times, but also a little bit about Shinran Shonin. So based on just these few facts, how could I even presume? I'm not an academic, and how could I presume to know what kind of person Shinran Shonin was? You know, how could I know that this man was introspective, that he was self-reflective, and that he was as humble as he is known to have been, or as we know it, right? Well, again, like I mentioned, he was quite prolific in his writings, and today we have English translations of his major expositions, and we have translations in English. So this is volume 1. This is the collected works of Shinran Shonin. So this contains his magnum opus, his very, very famous dissertation. And I'm going to maybe mispronounce this, but I'm going to try my best. Kenjo do Shinjitsu Kogyo Sho Monrui, and roughly translated as the true teaching, practice, and realization of the Pure Land Way. But and you know it, I'm sure, as Kyogyo Shinsho. And we also, in this book, we have translations of his letters, translations of his wasan, his poems, and commentaries, which were quite important in his studies. And it's from some of the facts, as well as his writings, and from Isshinni's letters, right, that we have, I think, examples through those writings of the self-reflective and humble person that Shinran Shonin indeed was. And so I'm going to talk first about just the fact of his marriage, right? He was a monk. He was a practicing monk on Mount Hiei for 20 years. Excuse me. But after those 20 years of rigorous training and following the precepts, right, that were required of all monks and nuns on Mount Hiei, Shinran somehow, it was just, he came to a point of frustration, dissatisfaction in his life, and so he came down from Mount Hiei. Excuse me. And I think that he realized that all this studying, right, all this practicing of rituals wasn't leading him, he didn't feel that that he was close to enlightenment, that he was close to self-awakening or awakening. Excuse me. And he was honest enough, I think, to recognize that even after 20 years, he was still encumbered, he was still burdened by his ego, that drove his human desires. And, he discovered that following precepts, which included celibacy, just really was not his thing as a human being. So while there's discussion even today among researchers and academics that Shinran might have actually had 2 wives, we don't know that, but we do know as a fact that Isshinni was his wife. And we know that through her letters. And so, in other words, after so many years, right, of practicing the precepts and practicing rituals, that if he was able to come down from Mount Hiei and then eventually marry Isshinni, right, he must have done a lot of self-reflection. Just think if you had invested 20 years of your life, right, studying, practicing, believing that marriage was not allowed, truly was not encouraged as a monk, and then all of a sudden you thought, okay, wait a minute, maybe this life isn't for me. I think that takes a lot of self-reflection, takes a lot of courage to say, I'm really human. I'm not able to practice these precepts as maybe I would like to. So I don't believe that he felt like he was a failure or that he was in any way humiliated for leaving the monastic life and marrying Isshinni, having children, and leading the life of really a layperson. And one of the sayings that is attributed to him is that he was neither monk nor lay, right? But he was very invested, even though he wasn't able to practice or follow those precepts. He was very invested in sharing the teachings. So another example came in Isshinni's letter, one of the letters that she wrote, and in it, she describes that Shinran Shonin had really was ill. He felt ill with a terrible fever. He was feverish, and she heard him reciting the sutras and chanting the sutras, which he probably learned when he was up at Mount Hiei as a monk. But for whatever reason, he awakened, right? He woke up. And he probably went, oops, why am I doing this? It's not something that I am teaching, because for me, reciting the Nembutsu just once even is enough, right? And so he stopped, and he came to that realization, and I think that it does take some humility. It does take some self-awareness to be able to recognize that, hey, I'm human, I make mistakes, and was able to just become aware of even his shortcomings. So in my research, I came upon some writings. I came upon the Wasan, and George Gattenby, who's an Australian scholar, did a lot of extensive study research on Shinran Shonin's Wasan. And after studying his Wasan, Mr. Gattenby shared this observation. He said, whenever Shinran refers, let's see, I think I have this quote. Okay, so you can read along with me. Whenever Shinran refers to his own inner life, it is often to point to the depth of his own human frailty and to his shortcomings. He clearly intends to deflect our gaze away from Shinran and to Amida Buddha. And I think that's a really critical, important passage right there. He, Shinran, clearly intends to deflect our gaze away from Shinran, to not focus on Shinran, but to focus on Amida Buddha. So even in his own writings, Gattenby writes, he clearly represents himself as the custodian of the Dharma, which he has received from the Buddha and from the Dharma masters. He does not see himself as presenting anything new. He is only imparting the knowledge that he has learned and ratified within his own heart. To me, that is clearly a description of a person of humility, right? He didn't want the attention on himself. He really wanted the attention on the teachings of Shakyamuni and the interpretations, right, of the teachings through the seven masters lineage. And so, for the sake of time, I'm going to just share maybe one more example of what I think describes Shinran's humility, and that is in the name that he chose for himself, right? Gutoku Shinran, meaning stubble-headed, foolish one, and signifying that he was neither monk nor lay person. I don't know that I would call him, well, after Tokudo, Ellen and I both did the tonsure, we shaved our heads. And I don't know that I would have called myself, stubble-headed. Maybe foolish one, but I don't know. Just maybe bald. So these are just a few examples, right, of Shinran Shonin's life of self-reflection and humility. And so I'm going to close, for the sake of time, by reading and sharing a passage actually from a book by OCBC's own Jim Pollard. And if you haven't read Jim's book, I am promoting it. It's a wonderfully written book that helps us understand Jodo Shinshu. And again, I think that these passages, reflect Shinran Shonin's introspective and humble nature. So this is the cover of the book, and I'm sure the bookstore has it probably. But in the book, let's see, Jim writes, my little quote here is different than what I wrote here. But I'm going to read this because I think it's important enough, and then I'll read Shigaraki's quote. But Jim writes, in Shin Buddhism, the only transformative practice is listening to the Dharma with self-reflection, right? The only transformative practice is listening to the Dharma with self-reflection. This approach resembles superficially the manner in which the early disciples listened to the Buddha, but there are crucial differences. Our teachers are ministers and Sangha members, all of whom are foolish beings, not arahants. We also receive the Dharma through everyday difficulties that reveal our human frailty. There is no end to the difficulties that teach me what I am. I must be open to learning from them. Otherwise, I am not genuinely listening and reflecting. Shin Buddhist followers never arrive at the non-learning stage. As trainees, He calls us all trainees, which I agree with. As trainees with a lot to learn, I hope that we will retain our curiosity and keep asking the questions. And then in Jim's book, he also quotes Takamaro Shigaraki, a very, very well-known Jodo Shinshu Nishihonganji scholar and priest. And Shigaraki says, Buddhism encourages us to engage in profound reflection on the reality that we human beings lead lives of ignorance, emptiness, and falsity in our everyday secular lives. Through a penetrating insight into ourselves, we are subjectively made to negate the present state of our being, which remains buried in the secular world. And finally, to close, I'm going to go back to the verse 116 of the Shozo Matsu Wasan. And so if you will join me with palms together and heads bowed in Gassho. I am such that I do not know right and wrong and cannot distinguish false and true. I lack even small love and small compassion, and yet, for fame and profit, enjoy teaching others. So let us today, on this Hoonko, let us be grateful for Shinran Shonin, who enjoyed teaching others, and let us be deeply grateful that we today can enjoy Shinran Shonin's teachings. Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda.